You may wonder about my religion. I am definitely Christian, Catholic, Maronite from Lebanon, but I go back to ancient times, going back to the Phoenician, to the Canaanite-Phoenician religion, which I found very inspiring, and I found so many connections between the Phoenician theological system and Christianity. So, taking a lot from the New Testament, we are depending on the New Testament, so this book is not to divert the faithful from their religion as Christians, but to prove to them that the God that Jesus spoke about and called the Father is not in any way the Jewish God that appeared in the Old Testament. Even in the New Testament itself, we find so many evidence that the Father of Jesus, the Father of love and peace, is not in any way the Jewish God that appeared in the Old Testament and who was specifically considered as the God of the Jewish nation. The Christian God is universal to all people. So we started with Saint Matthew. Matthew is known to have directed his gospel to the Hebrews at the time, and it was he who wrote in the gospel that Maryam will bring a child that will be called Emmanuel, which means El, the supreme God of the Phoenicians, is with us. So Jesus is Emmanuel, which means Il with us. Now, in the Phoenician pantheon, we have the supreme God, Father of all, called El, or El Elyon, El the Most High. We have in the second category of the Phoenician pantheon, Canaanite-Phoenician pantheon, are the goddesses, Ashirai, Anat, Astarte, and then we have the Elohims, or the sons of El. Adon, or Adonis, is one of them. Now, Adon is mentioned in the Phoenician theology as being the sun god, then rendered later on as the god of resurrection. Adon was killed by a bear, by a wild bear, and then resurrected in April, in the same month that Jesus resurrected in Christianity. Adon represented the spirit of the corn and the theological practices of the Phoenicians, and Jesus is the bread of life. So there are so many connections between the Phoenician gods, the supreme God and his son, with Jesus being Emmanuel himself, which means El is with us. Now, the Virgin Anat, and also called Ashirai, is the mother goddess. She is somehow in the council of the Phoenician pantheon, and she comes in the second category, or let's say in the first category after the supreme god El. Ashirai and Anat, she's called in the Phoenician pantheon as the Virgin Lady Anat. And Ashirai is another name of Anat, and Astarte is later became the daughter of El, the supreme god. She is also given the title of Queen of Heaven. And this, again, we see in the Christian religion. In addition to that, Astarte is considered as the Lady of the Sea. And etymologically speaking, if we divide the name Maryam in the Aramaic Phoenician language, it's Mort Yam or Mart Yam, which means Lady of the Sea, because Yam is one of the sons of El, of the Supreme God. He is mentioned as the God of water. Now, I always wondered if Jesus was actually a historical figure. because there are so many people who are trying to say that Jesus did not exist and it's just a myth, or is a mirroring some myth of the ancient times. But this is not true. We found so many evidence outside the New Testament that refers to Jesus as a historical figure. One of them is Flavio Josephus, who was a Romano-Jewish historian. In his book, The Antiquities of the Jews, mentioned Christ and the Christians and mentioned their belief. Pliny the Younger is another historian, author, lawyer. In his letters to the emperor, he mentioned also that Christ existed and Christians, and they have a certain belief that is actually a historical fact. Tacitus is another reference outside the New Testament. He's a Roman senator and a historian of the Roman Empire. In his annals around 116, he also mentioned Christ and the Christians. And we have Suetonius, Roman biographer, in his life, in his book, The Lives of the 12 Caesars, mentioned Christ and the Christians. And also we have, and these, by the way, they all mention Christ and the Christians with no reference to the Jews, with no reference to any connection with the Jews. We have one more reference to Jesus is the Talmud. The Talmud in the Toledot Yeshua, Sefer Toledot Yeshua, which means the birth of Jesus, they mention Jesus and his mother in a very bad way. So I don't want to mention it here, but they mention him in a very bad way. Now, this is Father Yusuf Yamin. He's my mentor from Lebanon. He actually made me understand Christ more and made me realize that Christ is really the Son of El and not the Son of the God that appeared in the Old Testament. This father actually wrote a book in 1999 in Lebanon called Jesus Was Born in Lebanon. It means ancient Phoenicia, not in Judea. Now, the patriarch sent him a note of congratulation to Father Yamin, and he actually and later some of the priests in Lebanon formed a group defending the Judeo-Christian culture. They somehow attacked Father Yamin, and we came to respond to them in a very good way. And we asked them, Father Yamin asked them to come and debate the matter with him, which they refused. Now, this is the geographical region of Mount Carmel and Bethlehem of Galilee. We know that all this region of Galilee, Phoenicia, follow the same Phoenician pantheon of gods, having the supreme god El as the father of all gods. Now, geography is somehow determining that Jesus was born in this Bethlehem or in this Bethlehem. In the New Testament, Jesus was born in this Bethlehem. It seems that the scholars are saying, like Jacques Duquesne in his book Jésus, or Ernest Renan in his book La Vie de Jésus, he mentioned that Matthew, in a way, who addressed the book to his gospel to the Jews, to the Hebrew at the time, he somehow decided to shift the two Bethlehems and made Jesus born in this one. Although archaeological studies show that this Bethlehem has been founded, has been established 200, 300 years after the time of Jesus. At the time of Jesus, it was a cemetery. And it seems that the Emperor Constantine and his wife Elena, who took up with Christianity to make it as the religion of the Roman Empire, it seems they favored this one. Whereas in reality, as I said, this one was not in existence at the time of Jesus. We have this one. Therefore, Jesus is called Jesus of Nazareth, and this is Nazareth. And this is Bethlehem. This Bethlehem is actually, in Phoenician Aramaic language, is the house of bread. And Jesus always mentioned himself as the bread of life. And this same place is the place where Adonis used to be worshipped, who is also called the spirit of the corn. The spirit of the corn, which means bread. So the correlation is very interesting. Now this is another map. These maps are authentic. I haven't played with them. They are really authentic. No Photoshop. Now here also we have Bethlehem of Judea and we have Bethlehem of Galilee. Now this region is Galilee, Phoenicia. This region is Samaria and this region is Judea. You see the color here combining Galilee and Phoenicia all together. That's why in the New Testament they say Galilee of the nations, Galilee of the Gentiles, Galilee of the non-Jews. In Galilee at the time of Jesus, there were no Jews. This is Al-Majdal. This is the place where Maryam Magdalene is this is the place where she originated from. Now we have here Rame, a place called Rame, and we have here Cana. This Cana is where the miracle happened. And we have the evidence. I'm going to show you the pictures later on. But this Rami is an important place because while researching Jesus, we found a person by the name of Joseph of Arimathea. Joseph of Arimathea, according to records like the Talmud and other records, he is the uncle of Maryam. Either from her father or from her mother. Now, in the British records, Joseph of Arimathea is a Phoenician trader. In Arabic, in the New Testament, we say Yusuf al-Rami. Yusuf meant from the city of Rami. This is Rami. We have 5 places called Rami in Galilee, Phoenicia, and Samaria, and 1 in Judea. One of them is now called Ramallah in Palestine. Now this one is the place of Joseph of Arimathea. And since he is the uncle of Maryam, he is not away from her place, from Cana. And Nostromo, in his book La Vie de Jésus, he says that Maryam went back to Cana. And it is in this Cana where she was when the wedding occurred. So that was her place. Everything happened in this region. Rarely Jesus descended to Judea. Maybe one time or a couple of times, not more. Now again, this is another map that shows exactly the same thing. This is Bethlehem. This is Al-Majdal, from where Mary Magdalene was, Rami and Cana. Now this is Mount Carmel. Mount Carmel, etymologically speaking, it means Karim Il, in the Phoenician Aramaic language, which means the vine of El, the wine. And underneath this Mount Carmel is the Bethlehem, the house of bread. Now we make the correlation, bread and wine.
Can you explain El?
Sorry?
El, you keep saying El.
El is the supreme God.
So God.
Yeah, Il.
Il and
Il.
Phoenician. All right.
That's why all the angels ends with the suffix El or Il, like Gabriel, Michael, Raphael, name it. Now, this bread and wine comes from this idea that he was born in the Bethlehem in the house of bread underneath the Mount Carmel, the vine of El, and it goes back to the ritual performed by Melchizedek, or Melchizedek, my king is righteous. This Melchizedek appeared in the Old Testament as well as in the New Testament. Eusebius, who is one of the early Roman historian, and who compiled the New Testament and the Old Testament together, because actually Constantine commissioned him to do that. So he decided to focus on 4 Gospels and some of the letters of Paul to be put in the New Testament, and he took away all other Christian writings, whether Gnostic and non-Gnostic, which we consider them apocryphal work. And Eusebius himself, in his book that he gave, the book called The Preparation for the Gospel, he mentions Melchizedek as not a Jew, and that Jesus was following Melchizedek order. So it's not just a degree, it's an order. It's a fraternity that has been in existence from ancient times in Phoenicia and in Egypt. And this fraternity is known as the Great White Fraternity. It started on Mount Hermon, Jabal al-Sheikh in Lebanon, with Enoch, one of the prophets that appeared to be a seer of visions, and he moved the teachings he received. I don't know if somebody read the book of Enoch. It shows the connection between Enoch, this prophet, this first man, with God, who is called Il. And he moved the tradition to Egypt. Now, one of the important elements in Egyptian religion is the fact that Thutmose III, when he was in Phoenicia, he got initiated on Mount Carmel that I just showed by the Enochian priest, and he took the idea of monotheism to Egypt. And Thutmoses it means in Egyptian initiate of Tut, or born of Tut. That's why the name Moses is not a Jewish name, but an Egyptian name, which means born of or initiate of. Therefore, Ramses is born of Ra, or initiate of Ra. So Thutmose brought this monotheistic belief to Egypt, but he kept it secret. It was not until Akhenaton who brought this monotheistic belief openly in his city Akhenaton. Now these people, the Egyptians, followed, or let's say that they formed with the Phoenicians a fraternity, an ancient fraternity of monotheistic beliefs. Having Aton as the god, the sun god in the Egyptian monotheistic belief, and Aton is a derivation of Adon in the Phoenician religion. This is Adonis. Now, the cultural and the religious entourage at the time of Jesus. We have, I think you got now an idea about what's going on here. So all this area Phoenicia, Galilee, they had a certain belief, a monotheistic belief in God, the supreme God, and in goddesses, and in a pantheon of gods. With the coming of Christ, this have changed. It have changed, but having the same idea. For example, in the Phoenician theology, we have the Son of God, Adon, Shalim, Yah, I just mentioned. Now, what has been said as myth, let's say it was a myth, in the Phoenician theological religion, it became a manifestation with Yahushu, with Jesus. What has been said as myth, it became a reality with Jesus. Yahushu is actually an Aramaic Phoenician name, which means Yah, Shu, may Yah saves. Now Yah is different from Yahweh. Yah is an ancient Phoenician god that has been mentioned in the Medianite region. It has been mentioned in the Ugaritic tablet, and it is similar to Yam on the coastal Phoenician cities. And Yam is the Phoenician god of water. Now Yah was transported with the Amorites, who were Canaanite tribe, like 2000 years BC, to Mesopotamia. This god, Yah, became with the Mesopotamians Ea. And this Ea, still having the same function as god of water. Now this Ea became known as Iyahu in the Chaldean Babylonian period, which is 7th to 6th century BC. Now, Cyrus II, the Persian emperor, it is said in the Old Testament that he moved a group of people and wrote an edict to move a group of people from Ur and Babylon to the land of Canaan. It is mentioned in the Old Testament as he is returning the Hebrews to their original land. But in fact, the Persians, like the Assyrians, used to exercise a policy of transfer from one place to another. So within their empire, expanding their empire. So they moved, but the Assyrians were more ferocious than the Persians. So the Persians moved a group of people from Babylon and Ur to the land of Canaan. When these people crossed the river, the Phoenicians called them Abiru an-Nahr, Abraniyin, Hebrews. But that happened at the time 6th century BC. It started 6th century BC. Therefore, the Pharisees, who are the rabbis in Judaism, is a name that derives from Parsis, which means Persians. So, Yahushu, then these people who came from Babylon and Ur, brought with them Iyahu, and this Iyahu became Yahweh. But now, Yahweh have lost its element as God of water and became a God of dualism, having Yod and Heva, Adam and Eve, as its function.
That's not him, is it?
Sorry?
That's not him, is it?
What do you mean? So Yahushu is the Christos in the Greek language. Now this is the what has been attached on the cross, having the Hebrew name Melech HaMashiach, which means the Messiah, the King, the anointed King, which is something that the Hebrews refused to asked Pilate not to put this, but Pilate insisted on putting this sign on the cross. And when he had a debate with Jesus, Pilate, and Pilate told him, well, you are the king of the Jews? And Jesus asked him, he answered him, who told you that? Is it from your mind that you brought this? He said to him, well, your people delivered me, and you said that you are king of the Jews. What have you done? And Jesus' answer was, if my kingdom was from this world, I would ask my servant to come and help me and defend me from the Jews. He didn't say from my nation. It is obvious in John, he will help me from the Jews. But my kingdom is not from here. My kingdom is from another place. Now this has two meanings. One meaning is that Jesus' kingdom is the kingdom of God, which is the kingdom that exists inside each one of us, because Jesus told us that the kingdom of God is inside you. He is leading us to this kingdom. And the second meaning is that he is not from Judea, that he belongs to another place. And this is actually one of the biggest debates that happened at the time. He actually refused to be called king, and he refused to actually have any connection with Judaism. Therefore, we find that the New Testament is full of so many instances and so many quotes that Jesus is actually ministering for a different God than what the Jews, the Pharisees, and the Sadducees are doing. So it's totally different. And it happened that when Jesus was once in Galilee and he said to them, I want to go to Judea, and his disciples told him, why you want to go to Judea? You don't remember that there, last time, the Jews wanted to stone you? They wanted to kill you? So, which means that in Galilee, where Jesus was, he was feeling safe. Which means that in Galilee there were no Jews at the time of Jesus, which means that the Jews existed in Judea and part of Samaria, which means that he belonged to another culture, to another nation. The family of Jesus. So Maryam is Mort Yam, which means lady of the sea. Very much like Astarte, lady of the sea. In Judaism, women do not play an important role in the religious system. Whereas in Phoenicia and in Egypt, women became priestesses and women became goddesses. And this is something that does not exist in Judaism. Yosef is Yosef. Meyaw Ad. Now, this is the family of Jesus. I tried to somehow create a family tree. And it started with, this is Yosef of Rami, also known as Joseph of Arimathea. He is the brother of Joachim. So Yosef, Joachim. In Judaism, it's Yehosef, Yehokim. Because Yahweh replaced Yah. But in fact, the original names are like this. So Joachim is the husband of Anna. It is not mentioned in the New Testament, Joachim and Anna. They are mentioned in the Gospel of the Apocryphal Gospel of James, which the church did not use to take as part of the New Testament. But then again, the church considered it as important. In this, we have Maryam, mother of Yahusha. Now, Anna is the sister of Elizabeth. And Elizabeth is the wife of Zachariah, and they gave John the Baptist. Now we have here Yosef, which means the adoptive father of Jesus, is the husband of Maryam. They brought Yahusha. And Maryam had another sister by the name Maryam, because the name Maryam is common in Phoenicia because it represented the goddesses. The goddess, like Ashtarte, lady of the sea. And this is also mentioned in the New Testament. And Maryam is the wife of Clopas, and they gave James, who some believe that he is the brother of the Lord, but he is not the brother of the Lord. He is his cousin, and these gentlemen here. Now, Emmanuel is an Aramaic name, which means Emmanuel, Emmanuel, which means Il with us. So Jesus is Emmanuel. Jesus is Il with us. Is the Canaan-Phoenician Most High God. Jesus was not called Emmanuel Yahweh to say that Yahweh is with us. Emmanuel means Il with us. Now, Il Elyon is the name of God in its most supreme or sublime form, which means Il, the Most High. Yahushu means Yahweh saves, and Yahweh is the Phoenician god of the sea and water. He is also mentioned in the Phoenician pantheon as the son of El, as one of the Elohims. Iesos is the Greek form of Yahushu. Iesos is coming from Yeshu, from Yahushu, and means the healer. Now, definitely Jesus and Yahushu and Yohanan and Maryam of Magdala and even Paul were part of a religious group that is called the Asayas. Some people know them as the name Essence. The Essence. But the Essence is not the correct name. The correct name is Asayas, which is a Syriac Aramaic name that means healer. And that copes well with Iesos, the Greek translation of healer. These Asayas, they had another group within them are the Nazarenes, also called the Nazareans. And we still say in Lebanon, Al-Manzur Lillah, which means the one who is dedicated to God. So this Nazarene derives from the Aramaic word Nazar or Nazir, and it means dedicated to God. And actually from this name, Nazareth came. Nazareth came later, a few years after, deriving from the name Nazarene. Now scholars believe that Nazareth was actually a place that existed after the time of Jesus. It is probably and most probably that a name that derived from the name that was given to this group, Nazarene. Therefore, we see in some version of the New Testament, Jesus the Nazarene, and in some other places, Jesus of Nazareth. Christos is the Greek name for the Mashiach. We say Mashiach in Phoenician Aramaic. Christos is the Greek word for Mashiach. Now the Great Annunciation, these are paintings. There are so many paintings that describe Maryam having, getting the Annunciation in the temple. In the New Testament, Luke and Matthew, they did not mention where Mary received the Annunciation at all. It was the Gospel of James, who is the cousin of Jesus. It's considered an apocryphal work. But in this Gospel we find the name Joachim and Anna, the parents of Maryam. James believed, he wrote that Maryam was consecrated to a temple at an early age, when she was maybe 14. And we believe that the temple that she was consecrated and she was being held as a chosen girl is the temple of Mount Carmel. And James also wrote about the Annunciation that's happening when she was coming back from the temple. This means a lot. It means that Maryam was consecrated in an early age in the temple. This is not a Jewish custom, it's Canaanite, Phoenician, and Egyptian. Second, that she received the Annunciation of the coming of a Savior when she was in the temple or coming from the temple. In the Gospel of Bartholomew, who is one of the disciples of Jesus and is mentioned as the disciple of Jesus, and according to L.A. Waddell in his book, The Phoenician Origin of the Celts and Wales and Irish, because he believes that the Celtic people and the Irish had some Phoenician origin. He wrote in his book that because actually the Phoenicians arrived to Ireland and arrived to Scotland and arrived to many places. We have reference that the Phoenicians had a secret reservoir of tin in Britain, which they used to trade with all around the Mediterranean. And it seems that the name Britain is coming from the name Barati, which is the Phoenician goddess. And some believe that the name Britain is coming, Britannica, the ancient word of Britain, is coming from Bartanach, which means the land of tin. And many British scholars are now going into that line of understanding. At any rate, the Gospel of Bartholomew consider in his Gospel that Maryam was at the temple when she received the Annunciation, and who appeared to her. I just showed in the I just show you in the trailer that it was some entity that looks like a high priest or looks like a god or looks like, and he practiced the ceremony of bread and wine. So the Gospel of Bartholomew gives us two clues. One clue that Maryam was in a temple. The second clue that she received the Annunciation from a priest, a high priest, practicing bread and wine, which is a Canaanite Phoenician ritual, practiced first by Melchizedek. And actually this is mentioned in the Old Testament because Melchizedek is shown in the Old Testament blessing Abraham while he was coming from a certain place. And he initiated him. But we doubt that because scholars and archaeologists believe, and historians believe, that this section was somehow put in the text to give a blessing to Abraham from a higher order, which is the order of Melchizedek. And we don't think that Melchizedek actually would bless a person coming from war, because he is actually the high priest of Shalem, and Shalem later on became Salam, became peace. The word Shalem became later on peace. So Maryam, we have no doubt at all that all references shows us that she is following the Phoenician teachings, and we have seen in the Gospel of James that she was chosen to, I showed that also in the trailer, that she was chosen to sew the robe, the purple robe, to the high priest. George Rawlinson, in his book History of Phoenicia, believes, and he wrote with evidence he had put, that only the Phoenician high priest used to wear purple robe. So she was sewing this purple robe to a high Phoenician priest. George Rawlinson even say something more important. He considered that the gospel that was not yet written, it was an oral tradition, was spread all over Phoenicia in around 41 AD and was accepted. So all Phoenicians, when the gospel was spread, they believed in Jesus as the son of El, as Emmanuel. He somehow strongly mirroring Adon. So what they believed as being myth has become a reality with Jesus, with Emmanuel, with Yahshua. On the other hand, in Judaism, Jesus was refused, totally. And this shows that why he has been accepted in this region and refused in the other region. Total different ministries. We have mentioned the Gospel of Bartholomew and his annunciation part, and we go back to Melchizedek, who is the initiator, who is actually the priest who consecrated the temple of Shalim in Jerusalem, in Ur-Shalim, to the god Shalim. There's something people don't know, is that the Jebusites, which were Canaanite Amorite tribe, built the city of Ur-Shalim 2,000 years before Christ. And this has been mentioned in the Egyptian records of the 19th century BC. A certain name was given to this place called Ruh Shalim, which means Ruh, the spirit of Shalim. And Shalim is one of the Elohim mentioned in the Ugaritic tablet. So we have four sons of El. We have four Elohims. We have Yah, which is the same as Yam. We have Baal, we have Adon, and we have Shalim. And every son of El, every one of them represented a function in the Phoenician pantheon. So Melchizedek, during his time, he consecrated this region and this temple to the god Shalim, which is the son of El. And this temple, later on, with the Persian propaganda, has been changed into the temple of Shlomo, which is the temple of Solomon. Because actually the temple of Solomon did not exist. Even Israel Finkelstein and many other Jewish and Israeli archaeologists believe that, doubt even the existence of the patriarchs, and even doubt the existence of the temple and David and all of that. This is not from me, this is from Jewish sources. And actually they have been digging in Jerusalem area, and they did not find the temple of Solomon. And they will not find it. There is evidence that some temple existed there, and this could be the temple of Zorobabel, which was built actually in 412 BC, commissioned by the Persians. It is written in the Old Testament, and we find a little bit bizarre to know that in the Old Testament, Cyrus II, which is the Persian emperor, was considered as the Messiah. It is written in Ezra and Nehemiah. Can you imagine the idea that in Judaism, the Jews are considering a Persian ruler as their Messiah? He commissioned the establishment of the temple of Zorobabel, which means the seed of Babel. Zorobabel means the seed of Babel. And Ezra and Nehemiah are Persian scribes. Now, we come to the historical evidence of Jesus the Galilean and his. We have here Cana of Lebanon. We have probably we see here a statue, and these stones here, engraved stones, goes back to the 1st century AD. It has been proven. They proved them. This is where probably the two seats is there for official at the wedding, where we can see the statue of one of them in Cana. These are the water pots of stone used for turning water into wine at the wedding of Cana. Here in this photo we can see 5 out of 6 mentioned in John. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 6, I don't know where is it. And here we see Jesus and his 12 disciples at the wedding of Cana. If you come there, you'll find there are 12 statues. These are basically 1st century AD. I'm not an archaeologist, but archaeologists have done this research and they have done their examination, and they found that this belongs to 1st century AD. Whereas in Cana of Galilee, which at the time of Jesus was part of Phoenicia, according to Flavius Josephus, we don't find any reference. By the way, that takes me back to Herodotus. Herodotus, in the book The Histories, which was written around 420, I think, 25. In his book, he mentioned the Persians, he mentioned the Egyptians, he mentioned the Phoenicians, but he didn't mention the Hebrew. I wonder why. Because actually, at the time of Herodotus, in around 420, the Hebrews were not yet an ethnic group. They had been transferred from Ur and Babylon of the Chaldean at the time, and they started to be there. They migrated in waves from starting the 6th century BC until the time of Darius II, and they built the temple of Zorobabel around 412 or 416. At the time of Herodotus, he didn't mention them at all. I searched, I looked, not in Hebrew, not as Hebrews, not as Israelis, not as Jews. In any term you can determine this nation, it was not there in Herodotus' book. So the disciples of Yahushua, these are here, and 10 of the disciples of Jesus were Galilean Phoenician. We had 2 that were not. One is Judas Iscariot, and one is Nathanael. Judas Iscariot is from the Iscariot region, and Nathanael, he believes that nothing good can come from Galilee. Is it possible that the Son of God would come from Galilee? And Jesus answered, he told him, you are an Israeli indeed, there is no deceit in you. So they knew each other. Jesus knew them and they knew him. And according to Jacques Duquesne, Judas was a spy sent to Galilee to spy on Jesus. And this is not from Jacques Duquesne. The New Testament says it. The New Testament says that Judas has been coming to Galilee to spy on Jesus. And I have the quote in the New Testament in the book, but I forgot now which one. But it's there. So they were spying on Jesus to know what he was teaching. To a certain moment, they reached a certain moment when he went down to Judea. They refused him, they confronted him, and they almost tried to kill him many times, but he always managed to escape. But this escape is for a reason. We're gonna find out. And of course, Jesus had female disciples. This is very important to know. He had like 12 female disciples. They were around him. Mary Magdalene is one of them. Now, that's why we find a difference between the Asayas of the Galileans, the group which Jesus belonged to, and the Qumran community that existed by the River Jordan, and who were Orthodox Jews. This Qumran community, and you found them in the Dead Sea Scrolls, mentioning them in Dead Sea Scrolls. These people are a male group, basically. They're a male group, and they considered women as something bad to them. They haven't accepted women, but they were Orthodox Jews in conflict with Jerusalem. Whereas the Asayas, who were in Galilee, they accepted women, and women played an important role. Mary Magdalene actually witnessed his resurrection. She was the first one to witness his resurrection, and she anointed him. So she is a priestess. Definitely, we believe that Mary Magdalene is one of the priestesses. Therefore, if we look at this from this point of view, we understand that this goes back to the Phoenician acceptance of woman and the temple being a priestess and being a goddess, something that did not exist in the Jewish tradition. Now, John, or Yohanan the Baptist, is one of the most important individual in Jesus' ministry. He actually baptized him. He initiated him into the role that Jesus wants to fulfill. Now, Yohanan is actually a Galilean like him, is a Nazarene like him. He has been dedicated and he has been consecrated to serve God. Yohanan, Mary Magdalene, Paul, Jesus, Yahusha, they all formed this little group called the Nazarenes, those who are chosen to serve God. But it seems when they saw the signs on Jesus, when they considered him as the one who is holding this message, he is holding the spirit of El in him, he is Emmanuel, he is Yahusha, then Yohanan gave him the absolute recognition, because Yohanan was bigger than him. So he gave him the recognition as the Son of God. It is not just a baptism, just like that. Even the New Testament, so many quotes we find in the New Testament that focus on the relationship, on the spiritual connection between Jesus and John the Baptist. So I mentioned which temple and what God that we believe that Jesus was talking about in the New Testament, and following the order of Melchizedek, which is the ancient order, going back to the Great White Fraternity. This is very important to know that their belief was monotheism. They believe in the immortality of the soul, and they believe in the accomplishment of the great work of God. So this line started, as I said, from 2000 years BC, and it continued with Jesus, passing by Thutmose III, Akhenaton, Hirams of Lebanon, the three Hirams, and Pythagoras himself was considered himself as one of the incarnation of Hermes, and Hermes is Tautus in the Egyptian religion, and is Enoch in Phoenicia, or the Phenok according to H.P. Blavatsky, which is the phoenix. So this is the order that started and continued, and on the other hand, we find the Babylonian Brotherhood. So the Babylonian Brotherhood is the brotherhood that deviated from the original source of the Great White Fraternity and deviated on the line. That's why we see in John calling Babylon the whore. And we want to resurrect the new Jerusalem with Jesus, the new Urshalim, the new the spirit, the new spirit of Shalim that is Jesus. Now the church in New Testament, Yeshua's resurrection happened in April, very much as a dawn in the Phoenician mythology. And after 3 days, like the phoenix rises after 3 days from his ashes. We have mentioned Eusebius and what he did, compiling the Old Testament and the New Testament together, commissioned by Constantine, and putting aside all the other Christian writings, whether Gnostic and non-Gnostic, like St. Bartholomew, like the Gospel of James, like even the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, like all this. He formed everything, but he actually gives the credit to Melchizedek and gives credit to Jesus as being following as a high priest according to the order of Melchizedek, the same way as Paul wrote in his letter to the Hebrews. Jesus is a high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. Now, the New Testament is actually the New Testament that we have, the 4 Gospels, Mark, Luke, Matthew, and John. It seems that Matthew and Luke were inspired by Mark, which is the oldest one, and by the Q source. Now, scholars, they're talking about something called the Q source. John is a different issue. John is a spiritual book. But Matthew and Luke derived their knowledge on Jesus, about Jesus and his words and his teachings, from 2 sources, Mark, which is the first one, and the Q source. The Q source is the Quelle source. In German, it means the source. It has been said that this Q source is an oral tradition that has been taught and has been spread in the region of Galilee, only in Galilee. According to Frederick Amsler, who is one of the Christian theologians, he believes that he wrote a book, The Lost Gospel. He meant the Q source. So Frederick Amsler believes, and this is very important, that trying to figure out the teachings of Jesus and the many things we have learned from Jesus, and even in the New Testament, in all the Gospels and in John, we have found out that the many teachings that Jesus brought do not give us the idea and give us the certainty that Jesus had no Judaic teachings. He was not influenced by Judaism. Frederick Amsler go back to add that what we have reached, the conclusion we have arrived to, is that Jesus holds a teaching that is different from Judaism and is always in conflict with Judaism. And this is the Galilean teaching. This is the Isaiah's teachings. This is the Phoenician teachings that Jesus belonged to. And in another reference, they believe that Jesus, the teachings that he had, the knowledge that he had, go back to the Prisca Theologia, which is the primary theology. And even the scholars of the Bible as a whole now are saying that this Prisca Theologia is Hermetic. Is Hermetic teaching, is not Jewish. And Hermetic is Tautos, Enoch, is this going back to the Great White Fraternity. Marcion is the Bishop of Sinope. He came around 140 AD, and he went to Rome, and he told the Romans, the church at the time, that your teaching is wrong. And he said to them that there is no way we can understand that the Father of Jesus is the God that appeared in the Old Testament. Jesus' Father was a supreme God, a God of love, a God of mercy, and he cannot be a jealous God, a warrior, like the Yahweh that appeared in the Old Testament. Marcion said this in 140 AD, but they haven't accepted his teachings. And actually there are so many Gnostic teachings that believe, whether dualist and non-dualist Christians, Gnostics, they believe that the story of Adam and Eve, when the serpent actually tried to give the apple to Eve, which is actually not an apple, there is no such thing. But this tree represented the tree of knowledge. So the serpent that tried to give to Adam and Eve knowledge or gnosis was actually refused by God in the Old Testament, which is Yahweh. So Yahweh, in a way, tried to control in the Old Testament, to control the mass, the people, to know the truth. Therefore, some of the Gnostics believe that when this occurred, the Father, the Supreme God, sent His only Son, Jesus, to lead the people to the knowledge of the self. Therefore, the kingdom of God is inside you, Jesus always taught. Something that the organized religion, not only Judaism, but even all the organized religion cannot accept. And the Church of Marcion continued and to a certain period of time, and then they just vanished. And we have mentioned the Gospel of John, and there is an important reference in John 8, when there was a certain debate between Jesus and the Jews, and actually John says it openly without any problem. He said that in John 8, with the debate that occurred between Jesus and the Jews, when they told him that we have only one father, Abraham, and he told them, if your father was Abraham, you would have known me, but your father is not Abraham, your father is the devil. So it's not from me, it's from the New Testament itself. John 8, look at it. And they said to him, we are not born from sins, and he told them, well, your father is the liar and the father of all lies. It's in John 8. I did not create this. It is really in the New Testament. So which means whether the devil existed or not, it's not a matter. It could be, it's definitely a metaphorical idea, but the idea is to tell them, these people, that you are from a different ministry. You are not from where I am. And the New Testament is actually full of that. There are so many evidence about that. And definitely Jesus tried so many times to tell them that, understand me, please, I am come to tell you about a God of love and peace. Why don't you accept this? So we're approaching the end of it, so yield with us. And now it's written in the New Testament, Eli, Elo, which means Eli, Elo, Lama Shabaktani, which means, this is in Aramaic, which means, why have you forsaken me? But in the Peshitta version, which is the Aramaic version, Jesus did not say that. Jesus said, Eli, Elo, for this moment you have spared me. For this moment you have spared me. And in another translation, Eli, Elo, lamash baktani, which means how much have you praised me. So the idea of death and the resurrection of Jesus is not the Father leaving his Son dying, but there is a resurrection, no? So how much have you praised me? I have been praised with the resurrection. Like all the people, like all the Christians who will resurrect with me at the time of resurrection. So it's a glorification, it's a praise. It's not leaving the Son. It's not leaving us a humanity. We are going all to rise again at the time of death. Death and resurrection. And all the scene in John, happening around this moment of death and resurrection, around this of crucifixion, Jesus is speaking about glorification. There is no leaving. It's an act of glorification. Actually, if the Father left his Son, there is no meaning of resurrection. It could have been a simple idea coming from the myth of Osiris and the myth of Adonis. But this is a glorification. And it is very important to know that Jesus on the cross, he did not say Yahweh, Yahweh. He said Eli, Elo. At the moment of crucifixion, he said Eli. And the truth shall set you free. Thank you so much.
I mean, how has this, if you call it a myth or the scriptures, why has the myth, I'm calling it a myth at the moment from what you're saying, of insisting that Jesus was Jewish? Where has that thought come from?
That's a good question. That's a good question.
Why are we so sure all this time that Jesus was Jewish?
That's the important question. If you look at Marcion, I have mentioned Marcion when he went to Rome in 140 AD and he told them that Jesus' Father is not the Jewish God mentioned in the Old Testament. Jesus' Father is the supreme love, the supreme Father of all nations. This cannot cope with this, the God of war and whatsoever. And Marcion, he also considered James and Peter and James, Peter, and John as traitors to the true Jesus. And we may wonder why. It was in 49 AD, James asked John, Peter, and Paul to come to Jerusalem because he was the bishop of Jerusalem. And he asked them for a council, and that was the first Christian council ever in 49 AD. And it was at that time that James decided with the other three to write the story of Jesus that has not been yet written. It was an oral tradition. But an oral tradition that has been well spread in Phoenicia since 41 AD, again 8 years before that time. And it was then when they decided to do two things. Because in Jerusalem, Christians were being persecuted by the Jews. The Jews refused Christians, they refused the new faith to continue, and they were persecuted. And one of the martyrs was Stephen, was the first martyr in Christianity. Stephen is one of the 70 disciples of Jesus, not the 12, because Jesus had many disciples. So James was trying to do two things. First of all, to convince the Jews in Jerusalem that this Jesus is the Messiah that you have been waiting for, and 2, to save themselves from persecution. But this failed. They failed to do that. But that's why we see in the New Testament the contradiction. That's why we see in the New Testament 2 Jesuses. 25% of this Jesus, or 15%, is a Jew, and 75-85% of this Jesus is not Jew. For instance, somewhere in the New Testament, Jesus, he other than the John 8 is a powerful accusation by Jesus to the Jews. But in some other instance, he tells them, if you go and make people proselyte, which means you change their religion into Judaism, you will make them deserve hell more than you have it. I mean, isn't that obvious? The conflict between Jesus and the Jews is so big. And he was refused, he was crucified, but he resurrected, he was glorified. Stephen was murdered, and many Christians were killed and murdered and stoned to death in Jerusalem. James was at a certain point that he wants to do something. He came out with the first council. And that's why Matthew, according to Jacques Duquesne and Ernest Renan and too many scholars, he shifted the Bethlehems from the Galilean Bethlehem to the Judean Bethlehem. And they manipulated the whole story. But they had one reason, is just to save themselves from being persecuted and to convince the Jews that Jesus is the Messiah that you have been waiting for. So out of protection they did this, and because they want, and it would be not a problem if some Jews became Christians for them, and some of the Jews became Christian at the time, and even those were persecuted by the Jews themselves. So the idea is that, and Eusebius, that's why we find in the Gospel of Bartholomew and the Gospel of James a different Jesus. Maryam assuming the purple robe. In the Gospel of Bartholomew, she got the annunciation in the temple, and the priest who appeared to her performed the ritual of bread and wine. This is all Phoenician, Canaanite Phoenician.
You mentioned Mardushi before. The actual story of Mardushi, as I was told when I visited the place, was that Mary stayed there because she was not allowed into Sidon because it was a Phoenician city. As a Jew, she was not allowed to enter that city as a Jewish woman. That's the story that was told to me. As far as Phoenician, the southernmost Phoenician border kingdom is Akko, not Nazareth, not Jerusalem. The Phoenician domain ended in Akko, began in Arad. That was sort of the border of the Phoenician, the base of the Phoenician Empire.
The grotto of Magdushi is actually the grotto of the awaiting, where Lady Maryam used to wait. She's there waiting for her son to return from his missionaries. It's not because she's not allowed to enter Sidon, but because she is there on the top of a place so secure that Jesus can come, because that was a place for a spiritual reunion at the time. So this is your idea. This is your approach of the idea. I have a different approach, and the approach I'm saying is different from your approach. That doesn't mean that I'm wrong or you're right, you know? So we're debating. But this actually, when I said when I went to the patriarch and he said, I know Mgharet Magdushi, you're Lebanese? I know Mgharet Magdushi. It is where Maryam can tuntur al-Masih. And he was so happy about it. He didn't say that, she does not because she was refused in Sidon or no. He said that I accept this fact. Now, the second question?
The main borders of Phoenicia didn't really...
Yeah, the main border of Phoenicia, it expanded, and it at a certain moment of time, it was from from Ugarit, from Arwad, from Ugarit to the Arish, to Arish Masr, to the what do we say?
Alexandria?
Al-Arish, to the Arish of Egypt, the land of Canaan. The land of Canaan. Maybe you are trying to tell me that the Canaanites were not Phoenicians or the Phoenicians were not Canaanites. No, they are the same. This is the land of Canaan. The Phoenicians are the Canaanites that lived in the coastal cities, and the Canaanites are the Phoenicians that lived in the mountains. So it's the same people. The Canaanite and the Phoenicians are one. And their geography extended and it shrunk in time. And this had kept on, not only me, Yusuf Hurani, one of the biggest historians in Lebanon, he said this and he put this on paper, how this land got big and how it got smaller in time. Now, and it is very important that even Jerusalem, Urushalim, is known to have been a Canaanite Phoenician city, built by the Jebusites who are Canaanite tribe. They know that. Everybody is saying that. I'm not inventing anything. I'm just trying to fix things. But even the name Enoch is coming from Phenok. And Phenok, if you look at the book of Enoch, and if you look at the genealogy of Luke, you will find that Enoch is the father of Canaan.